Imperfect Thriving, Episode 52, Leave Your Light On, with Shelley Buck and Kathy Curtis. I'm Catherine Ely, former attorney turned licensed counselor and coach. Oh yeah, and recovering perfectionist. It wasn't long ago that my self-criticism and fear kept me from having the self-worth, confidence, and courage to make my life my own. Through life lessons learned and by going back to school in my 40s, I'm finally enjoying my life in a way I never thought possible, and it is amazing. I want you right here with me. No need for you to go back to school either. I created this podcast to show you the way to the imperfect thriving kind of life, based on what you value, filled with self-worth, confidence, way more joy, and no more regrets. So let's go.
Probably means Ryder's here with you. I got messages from him directly and also through a friend who kind of receives messages from the other side, not professionally, but her mother has passed and she's been an open channel. And she got a lot of messages from Ryder, especially in the early months after he passed.
Today we have Shelley Buck and Kathy Curtis on the show. Shelley Buck was born into a creative family in the Midwest and moved to California after college to follow her dream of working for Disney. It was there that she met and fell in love with her husband, Chris, who worked in animation. After they married and had their first child, Ryder, she stayed at home to be a full-time mom to him and the two brothers who followed. Kathy Curtis moved into Shelley's neighborhood when they were both 12 years old, and an instant, lifelong friendship took root. She has worked as a healing artist and writer since 1991. Her programs support the transformation of grief, illness, and emotional barriers through creative expression. She is the author of Invisible Ink, a memoir about her own journey through grief. They co-authored the book Leave Your Light On, a book about Shelley's oldest son, Ryder, who received a cancer diagnosis at age 22, a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. He battled cancer only to die a tragic death completely unrelated to his cancer only months later. In this episode, we discuss Shelley's son Ryder and his unique and indisputable light, and how Ryder's cancer diagnosis and journey affected Shelley, the grieving process for Shelley and how it looked differently than her husband's, healing through creativity, how Ryder's light lives on. I won't make you wait any longer to welcome these ladies to the show. So first, I want to talk to you about some exciting things we have coming up in January. The first of which is 20-minute mini Mastermind Mondays. That is a mouthful, right? This group or groups will meet twice a month on Monday in the evening, and each group is going to be limited to 10 members. Everyone will get 2 minutes each to share a win, a personal win, and then make one ask from the group. Something that you want a little help on, or you need some support to take that next step. The intention is to nudge each other and give each other the support to make moves and accomplish goals that we have not been able to accomplish on our own. And I can't wait for this. Just DM me at Imperfect Thriving on Instagram if you want to join one of our mini mastermind groups. Oh yeah, it's completely free. Now I want to share with you a little bit about some upcoming podcast episodes that I'm cooking up for January. January is going to be all about decluttering our lives and our minds so that we can stop procrastinating and you can take action toward your goal and who you want to be. I don't want to give away the details, but I will have 5 solo episodes in which I will explain step by step how to declutter 5 different areas of your life to clean the slate and set the stage for you to make 2021 your best year yet. Your year to do big things. The year you become the best version of yourself. So stay tuned for worksheets, handouts, and Instagram Lives with even more support to remove the obstacles that have been holding you back and keeping you stuck. No more getting in your way. We are going to clear the path so that nothing can stop you. Are you with me? I hope so, because I think we can do great things together. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. These might be weekly, or they might be bonus episodes. Welcome to the show, Shelley and Kathy. I'm so excited to have both of you with us today.
It's great to be here.
Well, like I said in the introduction, y'all co-wrote Leave Your Light On, the musical mantra left behind by an illuminating spirit. I loved the book. I enjoyed it thoroughly, and I really loved the title. What led both of you to want to write this book together and tell this story?
Well, I'll start. I started keeping an online journal when my son was diagnosed with cancer, and I kept it going for years after his passing. He did not die of cancer, which we'll probably get to.
Yes.
But the title of the book is the title of the first song he ever wrote, Leave Your Light On. And I had a lot of encouragement from friends based on my journal to write a book, but I kind of put it on the back shelf until Ryder came through from the other side and said, Mom, write my story. I will help you. And he did. And Kathy can talk about that if she wants.
Okay, I just got like chills over my whole entire body. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, it probably means Ryder's here with you. I got messages from him directly and also through a friend who kind of receives messages from the other side, not professionally, but her mother has passed and she's been an open channel. And she got a lot of messages from Ryder, especially in the early months after he passed. And she would type them out and send them to me the next day. They usually came at night in her sleep. And that really kept me going. I mean, it helped with my grief tremendously because every time I felt connected to him, it lifted me up and would last for days.
Oh, that is absolutely amazing. Now, Kathy, I want to bring you into the conversation. Y'all have been friends for a long time. What led you to write this book with Shelley? Tell me a little bit about y'all's relationship.
Sure. Well, we met when we were 12, and we are of retirement age at this point. So that was a long time ago. And the minute we met, we were instantly best friends. We've lived apart really our whole adult lives, but we've stayed connected at the soul level the entire time. And her life is magical in the way that she moved out to California from the Chicago areas where we met to follow her dream that she had had since she was 10 to work at Disney and to be involved in the magic of animation. So she went to LA. I stayed really in the Midwest, and I worked in the capacity of writing and storytelling at the corporate level, and I moved around. But I had a sideline work that I did that involved my passion, which is to bring people through really, really difficult things through creativity. And I have writing programs that I offer for grief and illness and other things that people just get really stuck. And creative outlets help to not only allow them to move through it, but to become more conscious of what things mean to them and how to let go and things like that. Anyway, that was my sideline gig for many, many years, couple of decades. Well, then Shelley had been given encouragement by a film producer in the LA area to take her journal and turn it into a narrative. He thought Ryder's story should be told, but he knew that in order for people to really get into the story, that it would need to be more of a story and less of a day-by-day journal through the journey that they took. So Shelley called me one day and she's like, oh my God, he told me that he thinks I should get a ghostwriter. I have no idea where to look. I mean, what am I supposed to do? Go to New York City? How am I going to know they're going to be a blah, 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 just all that. Well, I've written a book about grief and I've been doing this work with people, helping them. And so I'm sitting on the other end of the phone thinking, well, I hated to say anything because I thought, what if she already thought of me and went, nah, I don't really want her to be the one to write. But anyway, I asked her, what about me? And she just screamed into the phone and was like, oh my God, I'm looking right at the answer and I can't even see it. So it was immediately after that, we began to be on the phone together every single day for 2 years until we had the book written and edited and ready to go to market. So it was a phenomenal journey for us as friends and very healing too.
Yes, I can tell that you are a great storyteller because I was just enthralled listening to that. And I bet that really refueled the connection that the two of y'all had and had for so long, getting to be with each other in that way every day, even from a distance. And so I want to talk about, I know this book, this wonderful story is about Ryder, but Shelley, it's really about you too. I mean, we get some of his perspective. We definitely get your perspective. And I love the fact that y'all weaved in short snippets and perspective from different people that were influenced by Ryder. I love how y'all did that. But it's really, a lot of it is about your family. So I'd love for you to kind of lay the foundation and tell me what it was like in your household having 3 boys growing up.
Oh my goodness. Well, they couldn't have been more different. Sometimes you'll have a boy and a girl and you'll attribute the differences to their gender, but these were all boys. And Ryder was born unlike any boy I expected. He was calm. He was intuitive. He was just an old soul. And I had to really tone down my energy in order to match his or just even get along throughout life. And then my second son, Woody, was born just a magical, sparkly character. He wanted to be on stage from the time he was 4, when he had his first recital and said, I love my work, Mom. And I was like, you're 4. Where is that coming from? So he's always been a performer. He studied musical theater at the University of Michigan and moved to New York City to follow his dreams. Then my third son, Reed, was born a wild thing. He was a storm from the get-go. Even before he was born, he was the kickingest child I ever bore. So that was another challenge for Ryder. I met Reed's energy with no problem, but Ryder really couldn't handle 2 storms in the same household. So he had to find his calm, and he often took it to the streets or the mountains or the beach in order to just find his chill place. And then my husband, of course, was working in animation. So we had that magic going the whole time.
So was Ryder more like your husband, or did he just come out completely different from both of you?
My husband is a very calm guy. I think we're well matched. And my husband didn't really have the musical background that Ryder picked up. But as far as temperament, they were more similar.
Yeah, anybody who says that it's all on the parents to determine what a child is like, they come into this world knowing what they want to be, don't they?
They really do. And the challenge is to encourage them and let them follow their hearts and really support that.
And as a mother of 3 children, 2 of whom are boys, I can say that it's really difficult to do when that child is opposite of you. Mm-hmm. To hold that and nurture that, even sometimes when there's friction, right?
Right.
So tell me more about Ryder and his music and what that was for him.
He always listened intently, let's put it that way. He didn't really pick up music as something that he did on stage until he was in junior high when he joined the choir. And that was an accidental thing. He thought he was signed up for art for 2 semesters, but it turns out the second semester was choir. And he found himself on stage. And for his temperament, that was the last thing he wanted. That was for his younger brother. But about 2 or 3 years into high school, he picked up the guitar. And when he was getting to the point of graduating high school, he said, "Mom, I don't know what I want to do with my life." But he had the guitar strapped to his back. And I said, "Honey, look in the mirror. It's strapped on your back. This is your passion. Go for it." So that was his permission to follow his dream.
Oh, that's beautiful. I know a lot of what happens from reading the book, but for those listeners who haven't read the book yet, tell us about the day that you got the call from Ryder and the news about what was going on with his health.
Well, he was 22 at the time, and I had one away at college. Woody was away at college, and Reed was still in high school. So I was painting graphics on a sports building down at the high school, something I did a lot of. And Ryder called in the middle of it and said, "I have good news and bad news. What do you want first?" So I took the bad news first, and he said, "I have cancer." And I dropped my brush and said, "What?" And he said, "But it's the kind that can be cured." So he had this great attitude from the get-go, and it took me all day to get permission from Ryder to talk to his doctor because, of course, he was an adult at this point. So finally I talked to the doctor. He said, the prognosis was good, but we needed to find an oncologist immediately. And Ryder had surgery within the week to remove the tumor. And then we got an oncologist and found out that it had spread to his lungs, and he was really stage 4 cancer. Wow. So that sent us into a storm of activity and research. And we settled on an oncologist that Ryder really liked, and my husband and I also liked very much. And he led us through with flying colors. He was a wonderful human being.
Tell me a little bit, and Kathy, I want to get you back in this conversation very soon. I want to know a little bit, though, about how that changed your relationship with Ryder through that process of going through the cancer treatments and what that looked like in your family.
Well, for me, I was attached at the hip with Ryder when he was inpatient, which was 1 week out of every 3. I was at the hospital every day. I gave him breaks when he seemed like he wanted some solitude, which was hard for me. I did a lot of research on my computer while I was there, finding out the best diet and exercise programs and what he might do. But what Ryder really wanted was not to know anything about it in the beginning and to just follow his own path, which meant when he was outpatient, he'd spend a couple of days on the couch just watching soccer or music videos, and then he would be off and running, like I said, to the mountains, to the beach. He even went camping once, and it was supposed to be about an hour from where we live, and he came home with pictures of the Golden Gate Bridge on his phone. Now that's 6 hours north of where we live. And he showed me these with the twinkle in his eye and his tongue in his cheek and said, "Well, Mom, I would have told you eventually." He couldn't keep anything from me for long. Again, he was a quiet human being, so he didn't talk a lot about his inner feelings. I looked at the books that he took to the hospital. They were largely spiritual. Some were about lyric writing because he was really, really into his music by then. He'd formed a band, and he even scheduled gigs in between his rounds of chemo. So there was a lot of letting loose of the leash, extending the leash, and even dropping the leash because, again, he was 22 years old. The doctor had told me right off the bat, you're going to have to let him be a man, which meant back off, Mom. So that was my challenge.
Yeah, that's hard for moms in situations in which cancer is not involved, right? To let our kids do what they are truly meant to do, which is leave us, find themselves. But I would imagine that was particularly difficult for you with everything that was going on.
Mm-hmm. I tried to get him to his doctor's appointments on time, which mostly happened. He was really compliant, but there would be a day or two where he'd drag his heels getting out of the house. He knew he was checking in for a week. He knew what was in front of him, needles and tests. He was sometimes less than compliant and, again, didn't really want to talk about his condition until the very end, when he suddenly wanted to know everything about what was going on in his body because he wanted to write about it and create songs. So that was a challenge.
He didn't really want to know until it served his ultimate purpose, which is being creative, writing, and getting the music out there.
Correct.
Yeah. So what was it like with your friends, with Kathy at that time? Were you able to step away from Ryder at all and recharge and lean on your friends or be with your other two boys, or was there just a sole focus?
There was pretty much a sole focus. I mean, my youngest one demanded my attention and maybe even more because my focus was so on Ryder. I did keep that journal, which kept everyone apprised of where I was emotionally, spiritually, and intellectually. People were up to speed with where I was. And when I sounded down, they knew to call or invite me out for coffee, just get me out of the house and away from the cancer. Kathy can probably answer that better.
Well, I mean, I had been through cancer in my family, and I know how intense it is. I know that you just want to do everything you can to make sure they are okay. Like she said, I could read every single thing that was going through her mind and her heart on Caring Bridge. And so I felt like I was in tune with everything, but I stayed back by and large until, I don't know, it's hard to remember. But I know myself well enough to know that when there's a moment where I go, yeah, I really got to reach out to her, I would do that. And she would always be more than ready to talk and let things out.
So how long did this battle with cancer last?
Ryder was in treatment 1 week out of every 3 for 9 months. He had a little respite during the holidays when they thought his numbers were good and he might be finished. But then we had tests and it showed that his markers were up. So he went right back into treatment in January for another 4 rounds. So he had 7 rounds altogether, and they were a week long each. As they progressed, he got sicker. Of course, he lost all his hair and spent more time on the couch, in his bed, in my bed, just wherever he could find comfort. And then in June of 2013, he was declared clear. They were very happy. They had given him an extra round just for insurance, the doctor said, which I never told Ryder, or he never would have shown up for it. And they said, you're good to go. Come back in 6 months. Wow. And he didn't make that next appointment.
He didn't?
No, he was hit by 2 cars on the freeway as he was walking home from his own car that had broken down. In the middle of the night, in a dense fog, there was no seeing in front of your car, 3 feet. He was due to go back the next week for his checkup.
So y'all had been on this, I would imagine, grueling roller coaster ride with all of this cancer treatment for months and months. And you get great news. And then you got this call. What was that like for you? How did you handle it?
Well, it was the CHP that showed up at our door, the California Highway Patrol, and said my son was in the hospital. I thought he was in jail, but when they showed up, They quickly told me he was in the emergency room, and I was home with just my third boy, just Reed, my youngest. My husband was in New York doing publicity for Frozen, and my other son was away at college. So Reed and I got dressed quickly, and they took us over to the hospital. It was a couple of hours before the surgeon came out and told us piece by piece how Ryder was broken. Then he finally dropped the bomb that they couldn't do anything more for him. He had passed. So I fell apart, of course. I had no idea which way to turn. I knew I had to call my son and my husband, but I was so out of it. I told my husband, you can just stay in New York, finish your publicity. And he was like, you're out of your mind. I'm coming home. I'm on the next flight. But very quickly, everyone knew. I put it on Caring Bridge. I put it on Facebook, and the house was full of people that day.
I can't even fathom, even after reading the book and after listening, how that would have been for you. Grief is different for everyone, and it's not a linear thing. What was your grieving process like? Can you take us through what that was like for you?
Well, in the beginning, I didn't want to live. I couldn't imagine. Ryder was my soulmate, and I couldn't imagine life without him. So I asked God to take me. I railed at God. I was furious. I was broken. I really didn't know how I was going to put one foot in front of the other, but I had an army of people around me, and I had my children and husband that still required my love and attention. So I did put one foot in front of the other. I got out of bed, not believing it was true, and then facing the reality. I took my showers. I barely ate. I lost a lot of weight. Then we started getting signs from Ryder, and that lifted me up and helped me. It sustained me.
How long into that process was it before you started getting signs from Ryder?
It was almost immediate. At the service, one of his teachers from kindergarten came up to me and said she'd seen him sitting in the pipe organ and just laughing with his head thrown back, just delighted. And this was a typical Ryder thing to do. It was a celebration of life. So people wore their Hawaiian clothes because Ryder was such a beach boy. And then I started getting messages from him through my friend, maybe a week later, and he was persistent and kept it up with me every week or two. Then it became every month or two. I did consult a psychic medium who had known Ryder in life. So she was very connected with him, as was her sister, who was one of his best friends. And she came through with absolute Ryderisms and things that she couldn't have known. And that sustained me for a long time. And then she stopped doing that. So I had to just rely on Ryder to get through to me directly. And he did. He came through in dream states that were more like visits than dreams, very vivid. And the dog would act strangely. I saw an orb of light fly through the room one day, and the dog was all agitated, and he was generally like a rug. There were things that kept me going, and he's still in contact. He's been in contact, especially with Kathy, throughout the process of writing the book.
That is so cool. It's like he knew exactly what you needed.
Yes.
He was using that intuitive part of himself that was there from the very beginning.
Right. He could always read my heart.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So, Kathy, I do want to bring you back into the conversation. How long after Ryder's passing was it before y'all started talking about writing this book?
2 years or 3, maybe 4, 5.
It was 5 years before we actually started the book.
Okay, I forgot.
Or maybe 4, maybe 4.5, something like that. We probably talked about it being a book before that because I was getting encouragement to do that, but it was still on my back burner. I mean,
yeah, that's true. You're right. It would have, because we've just put it out. It was a 2-year journey, so that would be 5 years. Well, and I don't think Shelley would have been able before that. I mean, this was a brutal loss. And A, she's highly emotional. B, Ryder was her soulmate, that child that was like the other side of her coin. And it was really challenging to be her friend and to have all the background that I had in helping people move through this and know that this is going to be different than anything that I had ever encountered. And I had my own grief about losing him too. So by the time we began, though, I think we were both a lot more ready. And even the writing of the book added healing to that journey itself.
That's what I was going to ask. So you specialize in helping others through their grief, illness, and emotional barriers with creative expression. It seems to me like maybe this helped in your healing process, Shelley, working through the ideas of this book, the stories for this book about Ryder with your dear friend.
Oh, absolutely. There wasn't anybody I trusted more. Not even my husband. He couldn't step up. Kathy, she knows my heart. We speak in shorthand because she understands what I'm trying to say better than I do sometimes, which made her the perfect partner for this book. Kathy tried to get me to write letters to Ryder. I did a couple of things, but that was earlier on, and I just really wasn't ready.
Mm-hmm.
So once I was ready, we were off and running.
Yeah, and I think the point that I might like to make about that, because having worked with so many people, there are people who have come to a program a week after losing a child, or they've come 15 years after losing their mom. I mean, when people are ready for that is so very different. But what I learned, and I learned it more in my time with Shelley working on the book than maybe I ever had, it is when you're ready to open up to the idea of being okay,
Yes.
that healing can begin. And I think in order for Shelley to be able to think about writing the book, she had to be there. And though it was still, we had our moments during the writing that were painful and they were challenging parts of the grief that had not quite healed. I think by the time we finished, I mean, it was just incredible to watch her courage and her fortitude to step up and do that day after day after day. So, yeah, got to give her credit for that.
That's absolutely beautiful. I want to follow that for just a second and ask you, Kathy, how does it benefit those that you have helped to process their grief and emotional barriers through creative expression?
Well, the program that I do was born out of what I did for myself. I had lost my mom, a really devastating loss for me. I had a really hard time coming back. And I was already leading people through creative programs before that happened. What I did with my grief is that I wrote letters to my mom because she had a very rapid diagnosis to death. It was like 2.5 months. But also my mom and I wrote to one another in life. That was just something we had done. We lived apart. It was before email. So writing letters, putting them in the mailbox, getting them from each other was just kind of something we did. But I felt the need to connect with her. I felt the need to tell her what her journey through cancer had been like for me, because we weren't able to talk a lot during that time. And I wanted to believe that she could hear me. So then after that, I got this very urgent prompt to allow her to write back, which was a creative leap, and I took it. And it was the most healing thing that had ever happened to me, to be that wide open to her spirit. It took the grief completely away. I mean, I'm being serious. It eliminated it. So when I put that into my own book, my thought was, I wonder if this would be helpful for other people, like if that would work for them. And I turned it into a program. And so over and over and over, what I found was helpful were things like writing about the experience of losing their loved one from a very different angle than anybody maybe normally would ask them. It was also incredibly helpful the night that I had them allow their loved one to write back was inevitably a very big night. We would do a 4-week program or we would do a 6-week, whatever the organization who hired me to come in, they would dictate how long we went. But it was just over and over and over again that I saw that just the act of writing alone, people would come into the first night and they would be under the dark cloud of pain and grief that they were feeling. They would walk out of the room a couple feet off the ground like they had cleared their heart, they had cleared their soul. They felt they were in a place where I don't believe that when we die that that's the end. And I had many encounters with my mom after her death, and I wanted people to have complete permission to recognize if they had moments like that, to allow it to be the healing that it's meant to be. And that's what Shelley did so well in the middle of her very catastrophic grief. She was open to him from the get-go. And that's really, I think, what the book is about, is that you get to know Ryder, a young man filled with so much light that you could not help but be affected by him. But that light continued into his afterlife. And that is what brought Shelley from slowly accepting that he had died to remembering her own light.
Okay, I can't think of a more poetic segue to my next question. Like, that was beautiful.
Awesome.
Right into it. And that is, Shelley, what do you see as Ryder's light?
Well, Ryder had a passion that was deep within him that drove him throughout his life. And his expression was drawing in the beginning of his life when he was young, but then he made the leap to music, and his light came through in the way he listened to people, in the way he intuited what people needed to be heard and seen. And he emanated this light through his music on stage. The love just poured off the stage and people were so swept up in it. He had a solid following throughout the LA area. And I think it has everything to do with the brightness of his spirit.
Yeah, it sounds like he was such a giver that he was able to really take in and be fully present to know what those needed around him, and he just gave it freely, is what it sounds like to me.
Yes, he listened with his heart.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Tell me a little bit about the Ryder Buck Scholarship Foundation and what you want to see happen through this.
Well, what we do is we offer it to the seniors at the high school my boys graduated from, La Cañada High School. And they have to have the intent of studying and sharing their music, as Ryder did. And they don't have to major in it in college, but they do have to have a plan to share their music, whether it's through theater or choir or band. It doesn't matter. They all have an application to fill out with some questions. They do an interview with my husband, and if the boys are around, the boys are there, and myself. And then they audition. They play something for us, which these kids are stellar. We have had such amazing talent, and we've given out 17 scholarships since 2014, which was the first year.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. So oftentimes when parents, two married people, suffer a loss, it can either bring you closer together or pull you farther apart. What did you experience in your relationship with your husband after such an extreme loss?
Well, we went about our grief in completely opposite ways. We are very different. Chris needed solitude. I needed people around me. I needed to talk, to tell Ryder's story. Chris needed to go up the coast by himself and camp and get in touch with Ryder. He listened to his music and he was very private about it. I mean, he was willing to talk with me, which is a good thing. We weren't pulled apart, but we were on different paths completely, as were the boys.
How did it affect your boys?
Well, Reed was with me when I got the news, and he's my youngest. And he said that he was there to be my rock and didn't even think about himself that day. My other son came back. He had been gone for a few years. He came back from college just shell-shocked and had to find his way into being the eldest. Even though Ryder would always be their big brother, he didn't have that touchstone above him. And his grief journey was pretty private, but mine was so open that I think it affected everybody. They could take from what I was experiencing and gather that to themselves to some degree.
It really sounds like you all gave each other the space to do it the way you needed to do it.
We had to.
Yeah. So when I was reading the preface of the book, this really stuck out to me. It said, how can we find our own light in a life that constantly distracts us from ourselves? It's so beautifully written. And I'm sure that this is something the two of y'all have thought about a lot. How can we find our own light when the world is going crazy around us?
It's a big question, and the remarkable thing about Ryder Buck is that he knew it. I feel like he came into life already knowing that, because he had passions all the way through his life, whether they were dinosaurs or girls when he got into junior high, or he was just alive to himself. He was alive to his heart. When he was in the hospital going through chemo, they have these very strict protocols about what you need to do to get better. And Shelley is trying to follow that to the letter. And Ryder, meanwhile, is down in the lobby at midnight doing Pilates or taking his chemo bag out into the night to play his music under the stars. And none of these things were really looked upon well by the medical staff. But throughout the whole 9-month journey they had through cancer, he absolutely he had boundaries that he had to keep out there for people to give him the space that he needed to be well. His well-being, he knew, was going to be critical in his ability to deal with the treatment, but also to get better. And I'll tell you what, to this day, I believe the fact that he followed his passions and he pushed the envelope and he did what he needed to do, that had a big part to play in why he did get beyond the cancer. He didn't become a victim. He was empowered by his own self. And this is not a kid who saw himself being perfect at all. He could be aggravating and he could be a lot of things. And he did it all freely.
It sounds to me like he was completely and 100% unencumbered by comparing himself to other people.
I would agree with that.
Like he knew who he was. He never questioned it. He never had to look outside of himself to see if that was right for him. And I think that is how we find our light, is by looking and digging and peeling through the outside layers to see who we are, what that one special thing is, that combination of our DNA and our thoughts and our dreams winds up being when we don't look outside of ourselves and compare ourselves to other people.
That's beautifully put.
It
yes.
is. Yeah, I like that.
Y'all have told his story in such a way that is what I'm taking away from it. And it is a beautiful story. And I could talk to you ladies all day long, but I know that we have pressed our limits on time. I like to finish up. First of all, tell me, how can everyone who listens, where can they go to find your book?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore will order it for you if you want to support them. They can go directly to leaveyourlightonbook.com, and there's a link there to order the book from several different sellers.
Yeah, very simple. Leave Your Light On. It's just so easy to remember and a compelling idea that we should all, well, I think about it every day because a writer is a part of me now, having told his story, but it has changed the way that I think about life.
Absolutely. So I will put leaveyourlightonbook.com in the show notes so that everybody knows exactly where to go to get it. I like to finish up the show with the same question to all of my guests, which is, what is one imperfect action that you suggest we take today to get closer to our best lives?
It's imperfect in that it's a little selfish, but it turns out to be very giving. If you can listen to people with your heart as well as your ears, pay attention to the way they behave because actions speak louder than words, and stay in touch with yourself, which is the selfish part. You have to be in touch with your own inner light to process the world as it comes at you.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Kathy?
Oh, I could answer that in many different ways, but I'm going to make it really simple. And that is, I think a lot of people even have trouble like, okay, what does it even feel like to have my light on? What does that mean? I'm going to say, if you take one hand and put it on your heart and breathe into your heart and just settle there for a moment, everything that wants to come out of you, that wants to be heard by you, that is important to you will just start to bubble up. So it's just a little technique. Put your hand on your heart. I put both. I put one hand on my heart and the other hand on top of my hand. Breathe slowly. Have the intention of finding your light, and you will be thrilled at how quickly and clearly it comes up for you.
Well, as I place both of my hands over my heart, I want to second y'all's motion, and I would encourage all of you today to take some time to put your hands on your heart, listen to your heart with everything that we have going on in the world today. It is so easy to listen to the anxious thoughts that our minds give us all day long. We need to spend a little more time tuning into our hearts. So I love that. And with that, ladies, thank you so much for being on the show today. I've really enjoyed having you here.
Likewise. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. It's been great.
And until I'm back here with all of y'all next week, go out and take daily imperfect action to the lives that you want to have. If you are enjoying this podcast, would you take a moment to go to iTunes and subscribe? It is so easy to do, and it would mean a lot. Imperfect Thriving is a part of the Practice of the Practice podcast network, a network of podcasts seeking to help you thrive imperfectly. To hear other podcasts like the Bomb Mom Podcast, Beta Male Revolution, or Empowered and Unapologetic, go to practiceofthepractice.com/network. This podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information with regard to the subject matter covered. This is given with the understanding that neither the host, practice of the practice, or guests are providing legal, mental health, or other professional information. If you need a professional, I encourage you to reach out to one.